We've come to our Friday feature now, Movie Spotlight, where our film critics give their recommendations on what to look out for this weekend at the Korean box office and online. And joining me in the studio this week, first we have Jason Bechervaise. Jason, hello, it's good to see you.
Hello Django, great to be here.
And we have Darcy Paquet with us as well. Hello to you, Darcy.
Hi.
Okay, so Darcy, we begin with your recommendation this week, and it's a Korean film that is shaping up to be a force at the box office at the moment, which is very welcome news indeed for the industry. It's called Exhuma. The title in Korean is Pamyo. Darcy, can you tell us more about it?
Sure. This is a new occult horror film, and it premiered in mid-February at the Berlin International Film Festival in the Forum section. And it's now in local theaters. So the director is named Jang Jae-hyun. Some people might remember his debut film, which was called Savaha, the Sixth Finger. And that opened in 2019 before the pandemic, and it did fairly well, although not to the extent of his second film. Exhuma has a fairly starry cast, I would say, with Chae Min-sik, the famous Chae Min-sik, in the leading role, together with Kim Go-eun and Yoo Hae-jin and Lee Do-hyun from Sweet Home and The Glory. That being said, I wouldn't call it a star-driven movie. Like, the stars add a lot to the film, but it's really kind of the genre itself. And then, good word of mouth. People have been watching the film and talking about it, and that seems to have been contributing to its strong performance at the box office.
Interesting. So can you summarize the story for us?
Yes. So there are four main characters, and they work as either kind of shamans or kind of experts in the art of feng shui, and an undertaker. And so they sometimes come together to work on these particularly kind of complicated or lucrative jobs, usually involving digging up a grave and reburying the body in a more favorable position, and this solves the problem that the family may be facing. As the film opens, they're contacted by this very rich Korean family living in LA, and they're desperately concerned about this newborn baby who seems to be under the influence of some kind of dark spirit or something. And it turns out that it's not just the baby, that it seems to be something that different members of the family are dealing with. And so they trace it back to the grandfather's gravesite in Gangwon Province. And they say, it needs to be exhumed. The grandfather needs to be reburied. Although actually, the father of the baby insists that they not open the coffin, that they simply take it out of the ground, immediately cremate it. And, all of this is kind of... it's a little bit hard to understand exactly why they shouldn't open the coffin and everything else. But they quickly realize once they get near the grave that, this is no ordinary gravesite, that digging it up involves a certain amount of risk. And it turns out that it's much more dangerous than we ever could have imagined.
It sounds very ominous. But yes, it's tapping into this fairly hot topic that's been seen in films and recently. Quite a few films about shamanism, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years or so. But yes, it sounds very creepy. So what did you make of it? Does it live up to the box office hype?
Yeah, I went in with really high expectations, and I loved the film. It was really great. It's one of these films that controls the atmosphere really well. And, I think we can characterize it as a horror film, but there's none. There are no jump scares. It's not a film that kind of jumps out to scare you, and it doesn't need to, because the imagery itself is so powerful, and then it builds up its story in a slow but gradual way so that it really pulls you in. And and it's not simply, I don't know, I don't want to give too much away, but
sure.
The direction that the plot takes, but it gives you things to think about, and there are different ways to analyze what the meaning of these events in the film could be, but even just on a straight genre level, it's one of the better made thrillers, horror films of recent years. I hesitate to compare it to The Wailing, because I think The Wailing is probably, I think it's one of the best Korean films of the past 10 years. And, this film, it reminded me of that in certain parts. It's maybe a shade below that in terms of what it's able to accomplish, but nonetheless, I was just really excited to see the film. The cast really adds a lot. It's a great cast. There are other characters as well, beyond these four main characters. But it's a really well told story. I mean, it's exciting to see something like this pulled off so well.
All right, so you had high expectations, and it seems the film met them. Jason, I know you caught this as well. Did it work for you too?
Oh, absolutely. I was fortunate to see it at the movie premiere here in Seoul, and it came out buzzing. It's just, there's a lot in the film that's really worth kind of reflecting on and examining. It's trying very hard not to say too much more. And don't read any reviews, because already I had dinner with someone and they were talking about, they hadn't even seen the film. They knew partly what the film was about. So just going cold. The visuals are fantastic. The sound actually is superb. The sound design is it works really well. And there are these kind of set pieces in the film that they're just great, they're so much fun. I mean, it is terrifying and unsettling, but at the same time, it's a genre movie that's clearly been. The director is clearly being influenced by a whole array of films, both here in Korea and elsewhere. And he clearly has an appetite for cinema, and that's reflected in the movie. And just to hear people talking about the film in a really enthusiastic way is really encouraging. And it's doing fantastic, and long may that continue. It's a really great film. It's one of the best Korean films certainly of this genre in recent times, and inevitable comparisons to The Wailing. But it's also a very different film to The Wailing. So I want to go and watch it again. And it's like, how far will it go at this point? And I think it'll go pretty far, because word of mouth is just really, really strong.
Sure, your eyes lit up like a child when you're talking
I was
about
like a child coming out of the cinema. I was like, I was lucky to go to the movie premiere, and I stayed out really late, partly because I was so excited. And I got home and I wasn't tired. I was like, it's like 7 a.m. I can carry on the whole day.
Right, but a part of that buzz at the moment is because this film has been doing so well at the box office, right? After the success of 12 the Day at the end of last year, we were wondering what the next hit would be, because the film industry has been in such a difficult place in the last couple of years past the pandemic. So could this be a sign that the industry is really turning a corner now, Darcy? Especially because, to be honest, I guess this wasn't expected to be as big a hit as it has been, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is a real point of optimism. And I haven't felt this optimistic since the start of the pandemic. In the case of, 12 the Day, Soul Spring, I mean, that, when it happened, it was really exciting to see the film doing so well. But, on the other hand, it was very much the type of thing that could have been a one-off. And, people were talking about it and they were going to see it, but you still didn't get the sense that the industry had fully recovered yet. But, this film, it wasn't... although word of mouth is really strong, it isn't the case of a film that kind of started slowly and then gradually picked up word of mouth. The audience caught on really quickly that this was going to be good. And from the first, day of its release, it's doing really, really well. And I mean, that's a really encouraging sign. This is the type of film that, prior to the pandemic too, it would do well. You could expect it to do well, but to see this level of excitement for a film of this type is something that we haven't seen in quite a few years. And, this comes on the heels of other encouraging news. There, I don't know, I mean, the theater chain CGV finally turned a profit in 2023, which is a good sign. There have been other, films like, Citizen of a Kind. It wasn't a huge box office hit, but that's a film that was... it was a word of mouth hit in the sense that it started small and then continued to do quite strongly and accumulate some admissions. And
also the same studio as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, I think that, the feeling I get, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but the feeling I get is that the film industry is starting to win back some viewers who had been at home, mostly just focused on Netflix, and now they're paying more
Sure.
attention to what's in the theaters.
Jason, let me give you time for your 2 cents on this as well, very briefly.
Yeah, I think it's possibly turned a corner. It was really telling that the figures for Sunday were higher than Saturday on its first weekend.
Interesting.
So so it's absolutely very, very encouraging. I don't want to be overly optimistic, but clearly this is connecting. It did remind me of The Wailing. The Wailing generated a lot of kind of conversations after that, and that this is doing a similar thing. So yeah, good news.
Well, I guess it shows that there's still an audience out there if the right film comes along, and currently it seems to be Exhuma, Darcy's recommendation this week. Okay, let's turn to your recommendation now, Jason, and it's a major Hollywood release.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of time, so let's try and get through this quickly. It's the sci-fi epic Dune Part 2 by Denis Villeneuve. The first film performed quite better than expected when it was released in theatres, so there was much anticipation for the sequel as well. Jason, can you set up for us?
Yeah, so basically, when it was released in theatres a few years ago, it was day and date release, so available on Warner Bros. Streaming platform, much to the outrage of leading filmmakers, including Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve. So now we got this film, Part 2, which actually hadn't been greenlit until the success of the first one. Now it's just it's now in cinemas. So it's based, of course, on Frank Herbert's 1965 novel. The first part essentially basically sets up or develops the leading character and the events that spark off what happens in part 2. Paul, of course, played by Timothée Chalamet, he arrives on the dangerous planet of Arrakis to ensure the survival of his people after his father accepts stewardship of the planet, and he's killed. And so Paul is very, very angry. I'm oversimplifying the plot here, okay?
Sure.
And so you've got these huge kind of sandworms that he kind of has to contend with. And but yeah, he's kind of inflicting revenge on those who killed his father. And to do that, he must be accepted by this group of people, known as the Fremen, as he joins them to fight the Harkonnens, led by this nefarious character called Baron. And so, he basically has to navigate all these different kind of challenges, and then he falls in love. And and so it's an interesting movie. I saw it in IMAX. It's very visually, very, very spectacular. Amazing cast. You've got, of course, as I mentioned, Timothée Chalamet. You've also got Austin Butler, Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, Christopher Walken, and a whole number of others. And Denis Villeneuve, of course, is known for films such as Prisoners, Sicario, Arrivals, Blade Runner, 2049, and I see him as almost like a younger kind of Ridley Scott. He doesn't often, although he did co-write these films, but he often doesn't write them. And he's one of Hollywood's leading filmmakers. His craftsmanship is superb.
Right.
And
was it good then? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah. I think what I liked about it is it kind of combines, on the one hand it feels very traditional. Obviously the novel is, it's quite an old novel, and it feels in a sense a film that would attract older men, especially here in Korea. That was true of the first film. But on the other hand, with the casting, it feels, contemporary in its execution. Visually, it's just truly spectacular. You've got these sandworms, these ginormous things, and one of the things that this Paul character has to do is ride on them. He has to be able to kind of not get eaten and ride these worms, and that whole sequence is just truly phenomenal. On these IMAX screens. One thing I would note though is if you are going to watch this, I wouldn't watch it on a conventional screen. It's something that has to be seen on the biggest screen possible with the best sound system possible. Sure. I think you're only getting half the movie, and so I see premium format selling really well for this film. It kind of might do what happened with Oppenheimer, in that it didn't perform, really well overall because everyone was just waiting to get those premium format tickets, and there aren't enough IMAX screens in Korea.
All right,
I see a kind of repeat of that.
Do you need to watch the first film as well to really enjoy the second film?
Yeah, you do. You can't really watch the second one without watching it. Well, you could do, but I watched the first one with my son, and that was an interesting experience because it's quite a heavy movie. But yeah, no, it's definitely. I watched it on the first one at home, and I was like, it's just not the same. It's one of those films you have to kind of go to the cinema, and that's the beauty of going to cinema, is that you especially a big IMAX screen, you're seeing it in its full glory. And I strongly suggest that you go and see it on a big IMAX screen, if at all possible.
Well, Darcy, I understand that you couldn't catch this film before our recording today, but you did see the first Dune, so are you keen to check out the second part as well? Has Jason convinced you to watch it on an IMAX like he's saying that we should?
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost just off the plane from the US, but on the flight back, I rewatched Dune 1 on the tiny screen.
I know.
But for me, I read the novel as a kid. I really did like the first one. I know that there are people who don't like it as much, but for me, it was
this one's good, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a cinematic event back when I watched it in the theater in 2021, and I'm so excited about number 2.
You mentioned cinematic event. I mean, this is even more so. I say there's more character development in the first film, more execution in the second.
Okay, that's where we'll leave it. Darcy, Jason, thank you for your recommendations as always. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, you too.
Take care.